Hello, everyone. Nice to meet you all. Thank you for coming. Just before starting, I wanted to ask a few questions to you guys to understand like who is in the room. Who here is launching a Web3 organization, startup, or DAO? All right. Who wants to launch one? Okay, so nobody wants to. Okay, maybe like hesitating a bit. Who works in a Web3 organization? Okay, perfect. So I kind of get a sense of the room, so it's really cool. Nice to meet you all. My slides aren't working. Yeah, they're working. So my name is Vlad. Unfortunately, it's not a really good name to have today with what's going on in Ukraine, but I'm from Russia. My name is Vlad. I'm the founder of Jericho. So I will just tell you a bit about what Jericho is, and then I will introduce you to today's event and how it will unfold. So Jericho is basically a community of Web3 builders, so people building stuff in Web3. So as you know, Web3 is a very chaotic place, a very like noisy industry, and so we really try to create a haven of peace for people who build. So a place with no noise, no spam, and only value. So I really like to say it's a peer-to-peer support system, meaning that it's people who are building stuff in Web3 who try to help each other. Because the space is so volatile, things like new trends emerge in a few days, die a few days later. So you really need to be sure that you can trust people who are going through the same things as you do. So it's really a community for Web3 builders. Today it's like 200 really select members, so it's a quite exclusive community. You need to kind of get your way through that, because we really want to make sure that we kind of control the flow and the quality of people who are inside the community. It's really distributed, so it started in France, so obviously we have a lot of French folks, but like the last batches that we had are mainly international folks, like it's a minority of French people, so it's really distributed. We have like people from Japan, US, Kyrgyzstan, Colombia, so like pretty random countries sometimes. And we have like various types of builders first. So when I say builders, it's mainly founders. We have like 75% founders, but we also have people who like build in Web3, but meaning that they support founders in building. So it's operators, contributors, investors. This is like 25% of the community. And then it's like different stages. Obviously, people who want to build a company in Web3, people who are currently building, people who are like at a more advanced stage with a team of like 15, 20 people, etc. So we have different type of maturity. We do a lot of stuff in the community, but I can give you a few examples of the initiatives that we have. First, we do AMAs with really big names in the space. So we invited founders of protocols like Celo, like Polygon, like Nansen, like Yield Guild Games. So really big like DAOs and companies in the space, and we really do it in a kind of peculiar way. We try to decentralize the AMA, so it's really about people asking questions to them, and they answer, and you can ask out the follow-up questions, and you can get like the essence of what this person was building. Then we have an investment vehicle too, like so. People who build stuff know that it's really hard in Web3 to stay away from the FOMO and the noise of crypto Twitter. So we kind of try to tell you that if you want, you can put your money in a chest, and we have a fund manager who's taking care of that for you. And then we also have a content library, which is also, let's say, a decentralized content library. It's not on a decentralized platform, but it's people from the community who put articles, threads about what it means to build in Web3 inside a centralized doc, and so everybody can access this library publicly. So how to join Jericho? It's pretty easy. There's a website. There's a Twitter, so we can check that out and understand like the flow. But basically, you need to get a first NFT, which is a hammer. This NFT will guarantee you the fact that you can apply to Jericho. Then you get accepted, and then you go through a fairly easy list of quests, which opens up the second NFT and grants you lifetime access to the community. So this is kind of the way we control the flow and the quality of people. We don't want it to be noisy. Like it's the last thing that we want for the community is to make it noisy. So that's it. That was a few words about Jericho. So about today's event. So I kind of created this event because I really love the topic of like, so the title is The Spectrum of Organizational Decentralization, which is like a kind of a heavy title. It's almost like weird, but I really like the topic of like how a founder makes the choice of decentralizing his organization to what extent. So do you do a pure DAO and really native DAO like Louis does? Do you do like a really startup model and decentralize progressively? Do you do like something quite hybrid? And so I really wanted to showcase these 3 types of models and then have a conversation. So the flow of the event will be 3 small talks from first Louis, who is working on a DAO called Twoplus, then Romain, who is working on Paladin, which is a protocol for governance, and then Laszlo, who's working on liquid staking. And so you'll see like 3 different models. They'll go like a bit deep inside what they do. It's just like 10-15 minutes for you to understand. And then we gathered together, the 4 of us here, to kickstart a conversation and open up the questions to you guys. So you have like 15-30 minutes to ask your own questions. So that's it. Really happy to kickstart this, and really happy to welcome the first speaker on board, which is Louis from Twoplus.
Thanks, Vlad. So, how do you do? All right. Cool. Hey, everyone. I'm Louis. Glad to be speaking here today. Yeah, I'll quickly give an intro on Twoplus, but I don't want to speak too long about it, and we can just have a conversation later on, depending on the questions you might have. So yeah, Twoplus is is it a DAO? That's a good question. I'll touch on that later in the conversation. But basically, I'd say Twoplus is a community. It's a band of people who are really driven and highly aligned around this concept called mental fitness. And basically, mental fitness is, a whole set of practices and a culture around sustaining and enhancing your mental health. This is a project that I came to found, to instigate 6 months ago. Yes, my bad. 6 months ago. Because I had been working the space for a while, participating in a number of DAOs, in a number of organizations, oftentimes in a community position. And I realized over time I had these mental health struggles, and I realized that each of our specific cases, we're all different. We all have different like physical health and mental health, and so we all have different requirements. But I kind of came to realize that mental health would be a thing in Web3. Because of how the space is structured, how work is done, remote work, but also like in these fully digital environments, collaborating with people across the world, across time zones, 24/7, and all that stuff. So basically, my personal story led me to kind of like both like merge DAOs, which were like an interest for several years, and kind of like this novel interest around mental health, and because I had this like this experience, the really deep experience that really drove me to instigate that. And so this is a couple of tweets to hype around the fact that DAOs are really hot. DAOs are like the new way of working. That's the digital native way of working. Younger generations, obviously, they won't go for an interview for a company. They will go straight on the internet and browse for projects to contribute to. And so that's the pitch deck we're currently working on as we're advancing toward like selling some NFTs as memberships to the community. And so there's a couple reports and data showing that people are generally excited about working in DAOs. But yeah, as I said, contributing is really tough. You have a number of challenges. Working in the DAO is a new thing. Most often, because DAOs are these new organizations that emerge on the internet, you don't really have a playbook like you would for a traditional company or a startup, and so basically you're kind of like on your own, being your own boss and having to kind of like make your way through different projects, and so you're mostly self-directed, and you need to learn how to direct yourself and how to find things to contribute to and add value. And that's a tricky process. That's a skill to learn on its own, and not something that culturally we really have. I mean, it's present more and more in society, but there's still so much work to do. Mental fitness, this concept that I mentioned, yeah, working a DAO, especially at high intensity, like running a DAO, building a DAO, it's a very, very intense process, and it's really easy to burn out, similar to, you know, building a startup or being a CEO or whatever it is, except that now, you know, anyone is like, all contributors have this kind of like self-responsibility and pressure and stuff. I mean, depending on how, you know, the way you contribute to DAOs, but it's really challenging overall. And DAO knowledge, like DAOs operates, you know, same as startups, DAOs operate according a certain set of processes, especially self-management, which is something that has to be learned. That's not something that we know by default. And basically, like, here also are a couple, you know, tweets saying that, you know, self-management is really important in DAOs. It's important to know, you know, how to behave, how to make decisions. There are a number of like of rules and processes that are core to self-management. It's also a mindset. So basically, self-management is also like something that, you know, we want to kind of like push forward as a community as Twoplus. And so, yeah, we're focusing on the human side of DAOs in a like technology heavy space. So we're a community, like our first product is this course, cohort-based course actually, for people who want to kind of like make their way into DAOs and learn more about DAOs and actually work on their mental fitness, self-direction skills, contribution skills, facilitation skills. And yeah, we started as like, so maybe a little bit more about how we started and this kind of like spectrum of decentralization, if I still have time, like maybe 1-2 more minutes. So contributing in the space, I saw that lots of DAOs eventually turned into like very noisy discords, and you would have all, you know, the same kind of like people in all the different discords. They didn't really have a distinct culture, and you know, obviously on the long term in an open source space, what resides is, you know, the vibe, the culture of an organization, of a group. And so with Twoplus, we wanted to take it very progressively, step by step. And so we started with just like rallying a bunch of people who were really passionate through just like sharing our message on Twitter, on the internet, through content, and really starting from there and consolidating a culture around that. And so now we're like around 30 people in the Discord, and we're about to sell our first set of NFTs, on board new people to the community. And we haven't taken the path of like just going and launching a token first, because from my experience, like it tends to be, pretty much of a diversion from, you know, the actual goals of, especially when you're like mission-driven, community-driven, culture-driven. A token can be a burden in the beginning if you don't. Yeah. So the plan is like launch tokens later on and start with NFTs. So for now, the project isn't really decentralized. It's been me and a small group of people pushing things forward. And basically, we're a small team of 5, but we're looking, so basically moving forward, we'll kind of like create all the onboarding processes that we need and clarity that we need to have more people in the community participate in the, you know, building things, building the DAO, and gradually go and set up a governance process and be more and more decentralized. Maybe some of the things I say is slightly a bit too technical, but we can touch on that in the Q&A. I think that's pretty much it. So for now, we're really kind of like so it's a DAO, but it's like mostly just a bunch of people for now, especially on Discord. And we will definitely leverage Web3, but I thought, that's kind of like where we are now. I hope it's clear, but I'll be happy to just chat in a few minutes. Yeah, I think next is Romain.
Hello. Good evening? Yeah, it's evening. Yep. Okay. So thank you for being here. Today I'm supposed to share our experience starting from a core team and trying to push towards decentralization. Donc quoi? Okay, sure. I'm supposed to do it here, apparently. Okay, so I'm going to talk about what we've been doing at Paladin for almost a year and a half. So we started at a hackathon, like a lot of crypto projects. We're very fortunate. We found an idea that seemed to be interesting, and we've been digging, and we've been building what we call influence market. So unlike a lot of people here, I'm actually a DeFi degen, so I apologize if I'm going to shock some people. But the idea today is not to talk about DeFi, it's about to talk decentralization. And let's start by this. Decentralization is a myth. There is no such a thing as perfect decentralization. If you build a project saying we are decentralized, if you build your whole logic about the fact that you need to be perfectly decentralized, you will achieve nothing simply because that's not possible. It was supposed to be GIF, but the idea you should think about decentralization is like this, like a logarithmic curve, in the sense that it's a limit. There's a certain absolute that is decentralization, and your goal is going to be to choose how much you want to be decentralized, for what reason, why do you want to be decentralized, and then creating a plan around these goals. At least personally, and I would love if you guys could come after the talk and prove me otherwise, I don't think it's actually possible to be perfectly decentralized and have a functional product. So, the way we think about decentralization is not simply just a logic of limit. It's something that's a bit more complicated in the sense that any system, if you're going to put a lot of decentralization into it, it's going to have centralized factors. And on the other way around, if you have to try to put a lot of centralization, you're going to have decentralized factors that are going to come in, simply because systems tend to equilibrate each other. So the more you push on one side, the more the other side is going to come in. So we have to think ourselves when we're building protocols, when we're building dApps, as system builders, and any system should be equilibrated. So the idea is, do I want to have a whole constellation of companies who are going to work around a decentralized protocol, or do I want a centralized entity and a lot of decentralized things around that are going to start working around it? This is the best way I think we should think about decentralization. And that's the way we've been thinking about Paladin, because what we're building is today an influence market, and tomorrow an ecosystem to push more people to participate into governance. So let's keep on talking about decentralization, shall we? The most important question you should ask yourself is, why do I want to decentralize? Because you don't just say, I want to be decentralized because it's trendy. If you do, cool, you raise 2 million, and then in 3 years, well, your dApp won't be worth anything. And your vesting won't even be finished, by the way. So there's like 4 reasons I could think of. Let me know if you have any more, that can tell you why it's worth decentralizing. First, it's for credible neutrality, in the sense that you think that humans or intermediaries are biased, so you should let the algorithms or a decentralized mass of people actually decide how things should be done. You're basically removing the risk of human. The second, well, it's removing, not this time for credible neutrality, but simple humans from you changing by code. It allows to automate, to make things faster. Then it's to bypass regulation. Let's be honest. I think simply today it allows us to go faster than what could currently we would be able to do in finance. So that's why you have less than 5 banks that were created in France during the past 20 years, and everyone is building a hedge fund or a crypto project in DeFi. It's because it's simply easier. And the last thing, and I think that's very important, it's to experiment. The fact that we can build decentralized technology means we can have an unlimited access to social, financial, economic, and political experimentation in a sandbox where there's thousands of people playing the game. And I think that's extremely powerful. And that's why we wanted to build an influence market. So let's get back on track. Why did we build Paladin? So I can give you a framework. Well, influence markets are dangerous. Imagine you're putting billions and billions of dollars of voting power into a single fund, or being managed by someone. What makes you think he won't abuse from it? This is an extremely powerful position. So our idea was, let's abstract the fact that someone could actually abuse it or use its power, and let's just put it in a decentralized contract. And that's why we think we're in a prime position to build an influence market, simply because we actually can't use it. It's literally, it can only be used by the people who are accessing the contract. So it's transparent and it's at least a little bit fair. It totally reduces the risk. Then there's regulatory protection. I think protection is an abusive word, let's be honest, especially when you look at regulation that's coming. Let's say that it allows more people to experiment and have more leeway because there's a very opaque situation that hasn't been described and interpreted correctly by lawyers or by regulators. And the last part, which I think is very important, is about community ownership. It's much easier to bring up a network if you're decentralized because people actually feel like they own the network. And most of the time, if you do your job correctly, they actually do. Okay, so now we talked about the broader part about decentralization. Let's talk about our journey. If you build a project like we did, you're going to have to start incorporating. Why? Because in law, when you actually start working with someone, you're supposed to actually show your affectio societatis. I'm sorry, terrible accent. But you're basically supposed to build a company that's going to have revenue, that's going to pay taxes, and that's going to allow you to start working together. You cannot expect escape taxes. It's like death. So then, or before, you should find the right team and choose what kind of entity you want. So is it a company, an association? Is it going to be a foundation? And where do you want to build? Trust me, there are better countries than France to build a protocol, unfortunately. But these are questions you should always ask when you're starting to your decentralization process, which is basically building a project. Okay, you've built a company, you've started doing the job. For example, you have a proof of concept, you have a DApp that's out on mainnet or on testnet. Then you have to start planning. I have the admin keys. I don't have a token. I'm deciding everything. How am I going to decentralize? How much time am I going to take? Because there is actually, we talk a lot about progressive decentralization. I think it's really dangerous to decentralize from the get-go. Very few projects have actually done that correctly. So how much time is it going to take? How much will it cost? Because it has a cost to incentivize people to take over, to make the right infrastructure choices. And what are going to be your milestones? So once you have your plan, good. Now you can start actually doing it. That's nice, but you actually need people to follow you. So you're going to have to find your first believers, to create a crowd, to create activities, to create sub-DAOs, to create a way for people to coordinate online. And that's why things like Twoplus are very essential, because you actually need to find a way to make it sustainable for people to spend their life working for DAOs. And then you're going to have to hire the first believers, either inside of the core team, we've done that, or outside through sub-DAOs, which I think is probably more healthy. So once you have that community, good, you have things running. Today we have roughly 2,500 people on our Discord. I think we're more or less there. Then is the scary part, the handover. We're not there yet. A few projects actually did it correctly. Maker, others, I don't have some in mind. So that actually means you're giving parameters away, parameters management, you're giving usually what you're going to do is you're going to have one address that's controlling everything, you're going to do multi-sig, and then you're going to go on-chain. So who should you give it to, how much control they should have, and how much time is it going to take to actually transition into all of this? And then the question is, once you've done the handover, what about the core team? Should they just exit and just leave off their allocation, which is a really bad best practice, by the way? Or should you take your time, support it, and at some point try to let go of the project? I think no one has figured this out yet. But the idea was to show you guys what's coming. And once we have all of this going and we have actually a sustainable project, well, how do you make more people coming in? How do you make it so that these people want to keep working for this project? And that's basically the whole question we've been asking ourselves at Paladin. How do we make DAOs successful and sustainable for the next hundreds, even thousands of years? And I think it's going to be an interesting challenge. So yeah, the last thing I wanted to say is everything I've just said, don't expect it to happen correctly. It's going to be very complicated because most of the people have not incorporated their entity at the start. Most of the people have not paid taxes. Most of the people do not know who are the stakeholders, and if they did the distribution wrong, so they have a lot of speculators, which happens a lot. So you see a lot of people who are getting their treasury liquidated through a vote. It happened 2 days ago to a DAO. And then have you built the right reasons for them to take over and to manage the DAO when you won't be here? So yeah, that was a brief outline on the challenges on building a DAO and going decentralized.
Thanks, loved it. Can you hear me well? Yeah, I think you can, right? I might be the last presentation, so afterwards it's going to be a chat, and we're just happy to enjoy sunny Paris and beers. No, what I like on the last presentation is about like I think a DAO is between two options. It's super hard to launch a company and decentralize it from the beginning. So either you have a centralized company and you go path forward decentralization, or either you are multiple companies and you try to create a protocol and a DAO. So that's what we might create soon, but it's been hard to decentralize the company. So just a bit of a background. Does anyone know about staking here? Ooh. Liquid staking? Ooh. Quite a lot, actually. Oh, sorry. I was in the dark. Wow, now I'm blind. So we are a staking as a service company. We do centralized staking, and now we are launching a liquid staking product, which meant to be a little bit more decentralized. The other way, perfect. So I will give you a bit of the startup history. We launched in 2018 at Station F. So for those we know the France and the French ecosystem. We were in the first Web3 and blockchain incubator back in 2018. And back then we're doing much other stuff. We started by doing decentralized identity. So I explained to French authorities what was Web3 and decentralized identity. Trust me, they couldn't understand the word. Then we went from private node as a service, public node as a service, and staking. So we're trying to be infrastructure provider in Web3. What Web3 is compared to Web 1 and Web 2 is really about decentralization and giving the ownership back to the users, right? So how can you be a very good infrastructure provider and try to be decentralized at the same time? Super hard. So that's what I said. That's what I told you. That's where the company have been moving to, and now we're doing staking. Staking as a service. So what do we do? What is staking? Because a lot of people use the word of staking in many ways. Liquidity providing, collateralization, lending. Staking, we say staking is the protocol yields, is the way to secure the V2 of validation process after proof of work, right? Staking is the concept of taking tokens, for example, ETH, blocking it on a validator, and earn the rewards of the protocol. So rewards of the protocol will be the inflation, the new tokens, the new Ethereum inflated every year, and the protocol fees. So every time you mint an NFT, this fees, the gas that you pay to the network goes back to the validators. So that's what we do. Basically, we run validators for different protocols, and we're trying to put liquid as well, because the protocol yield in staking is not a DeFi product, but liquid staking is, right? So, but I might explain a little bit more what it is afterwards. Yes, so we run a tons of validators, something around 7,000 on many different protocols. So, at some point it has been super hard to being decentralized. Why? Because we're using centralized cloud provider, even if we're using several to be a little bit more decentralized. We're using centralized tech, such as Kubernetes, to orchestrate our clusters. And we've seen decentralized projects trying to reach the amount of SLA we have, but still super hard. Not saying it's impossible. We've been working for them and launching some of them, but super hard. That's what we're trying. Like we offer also companies with widgets to offer staking to the clients. So that's some of the widgets that we have. They can plug Solana Ethereum staking in just a day. And yeah, we've been also launching new protocols. So does anyone know Pocket Network here? Pocket Network. So it's a decentralized RPC nodes protocol. Meaning, like instead of using Alchemy or Infura, you can use Pocket, and in the backend there will be many providers running the nodes, not just one provider in AWS or GCP. And yeah, we've been launching Pocket in 2020. That was our first staking experience. At some point, we had 80% of Pocket. So yes, it wasn't that decentralized when we launched it. But now when we left the network, we had only 5% of the network, and many other brilliant staking providers and infrastructure provider were supporting Pockets. So you could see the path to decentralization on Pockets. We also launching Switchboard and Forta. I don't know if you know this protocol. One is Decentralized Oracle on Solana, and the other one is a security monitoring tool that is decentralized as well. So meaning, as a centralized company, because we have a bunch of very good, excellent, brilliant DevOps that can run infrastructure with top SLA, we are able to help decentralized protocol to launch. Because at the end of the day, to make the decentralized protocol up a certain amount of time, and you need it, because if you do a decentralized Oracle, at the end of the day, you're still serving data to the client, so it needs to be up. You need to have an upside of 98, 99%. If you launch a decentralized RPC node protocol, same. You need to have the same efficiency with centralized tools, one day. That's super hard. So you still need skilled centralized infrastructure providers such as us to deploy and make these protocols more and more and more efficient year by year. So that's what we do. Right now we're working with a bunch of clients, and we offer staking to custodians and exchanges. So you might think, like, why I'm talking about decentralization, because we are really centralized. Even if we are a centralized provider, helping decentralized protocol and technology to live and to exist. We thought about decentralization back in 2019. I don't know if anyone knows Philippe Onningham here, but he's the OG in France about DAOs, right? He was talking about DAOs back in 2015. Was Backfeed and DAO Stack before Aragon was even existing. And yeah, he explained to me, like, man, if you want to take your monitoring tool to run validators or nodes in a proper way, you should open source your tech, put a token on it, and create a continuous organization. I was like, what the fuck? What are you talking about? 2019, I was like, I just came out from Berlin, from Full Node, and a bunch of people there were like, yeah, of course, DAO is going to change the world. But at the time, I was like, nah, are you sure of that? And they were right. DAO are changing the world now. Back then, it wasn't that obvious. So yeah, I think what's 2020, that's a graph we have from 2020. We again try to decentralize the validation process. I think our team, maybe our focus was not deep enough. So other companies managed and are not, are about to succeed to do that. So what is decentralizing the validation process? We call it secret shared validators. So you basically give the rights of the signature to multiple providers, and you create a consensus. Sorry. Can I have some more beer? Sorry, gents. It's Friday, right? Much better. Yeah, so secret share validator. So basically, it's quite new. I think it's gonna change the way you validate blockchain on proof of stake networks, because it's only on Ethereum, right? So these are friends of us. We are investors and also beta testers of their protocol, and you basically via MPC share with multiple validators the power to sign blocks and to validate transaction and to create blocks. So basically, the small node operator, you on your machine, can share with other professional providers such as us expertise. So you make sure when you are down, there's always someone up in the network that can validate. Very interesting. Yeah, today's DAOs are more complicated to regulate than centralized company. You said it, right? Super hard. In France, Europe, there's no very good framework, but still, we decided to try. So who knows about liquid staking here? Liquid staking, Good, good, good. Who use liquid staking? Who's stake on Lido? So we're trying to launch the institutional Lido, which means there will be KYC. Boo. And they will, it's also a product for channel partners. And we actually doing this DAO with multiple companies. So I think you said it. We're not decentralizing a company. That was the first option, but we just launching a protocol with other staking providers in the space. That's why how we're trying to to bring value and to launch a decentralized product on staking. So I think that's it. Oh, and why you need decentralization on liquid staking? Because liquid staking is a DeFi product. It needs to be interoperable. It needs to be, it needs to have a governance. It needs to work with multiple provider. Otherwise, if you use Lido and there's one provider in the backend, it's super centralized. There's no way of having a token that is connected to the rest of DeFi ecosystem. I think that we're done. Come on, that's our team, but you don't care about that. Thank you so much. And I think it's the time for Q&A.
Un, deux.
C'est bien en fait. Est-ce que je peux juste avoir la box chez moi parce que ça pourrait servir.
You can join me, guys. It's better. All right. So just before opening it up to you guys as a Q&A, I'm just going to ask a few questions because I thought that a lot of this stuff was super interesting. So I just want to get some clarity on some stuff that was said. Also for you, if you like, as it was a bit rushed, maybe you didn't get everything. But like the first question I have is to you, Louis. Because you said that actually Twoplus isn't really a DAO, it's a community. I know that before you like, at least on Twitter it was written like Twoplus Dao, so you consider it as a DAO. What changed in the meantime, and what are for you like personally the characteristic of a DAO, and what is the path for you to go from now to this moment? Like, is it like the governance? Is it something else? Is it the community ownership? I'm really interested to have your point of view on that.
Yeah, I think that the governance element is really important to consider something a DAO. Yeah, I think, and a fairly distributed ownership. I don't think there's like a formal way to describe a DAO. I think that the definition of a DAO comes from, protocols and Ethereum and other algorithmic, algorithmically coordinated networks. And so in our case, in Twoplus, it's really about, humans coordinating things and coordinating the work. And so that's already such a huge difference. You cannot really, automate everything through software. There's a large human component, and because of this, there's some degree of centralization by default because of people acquiring knowledge, people acquiring influence, power, reputation, and stuff. And what you can do is like make this like this landscape, this organization legible and clear, and that's the best way to kind of like this will deal with centralization in such structures. But basically, with Twoplus, I think we just said we're a DAO because everyone says they're a DAO today, and the DAO term is like so hype and stuff. And I think it's more of a marketing stunt than something that that actually, I don't really believe we're a DAO. I think the DAO term is hardly applicable to Twoplus. I feel like we're more of a project operating fully digitally, leveraging Web3 for things like ownership and governance soon. And something that, so yeah, that's how I would define a project like Twoplus. Is like we're just organizing under the constraints of async time zones, global community, working mostly also interacting on social networks, social platforms, and using Web3 to have this credible neutrality and distributed ownership and all that stuff. So yeah, that's a more precise definition, I think.
Okay, and you said so you will launch some NFTs soon. So it will like kind of the first way you try to, let's say, fundraise with the community. And I'm really like interested in also this topic around like decentralized organization, about like how do we approach fundraising, either like with VCs or with the community. How much like involving the community means that you start decentralizing. And I also really want to have Romain's point of view on that, because like you launched a token not so long ago. So how did it go? Like, what are like the things you learned? And you said like, so you're not yet at the handover to the community at all, but what's like the path that you have in mind? So really interested in having your 2 points of view in terms of like how fundraising affects this decentralization.
Yeah, I'll be very quick. So on our end, I feel like we're still trying to figure it out, and also just selling NFTs and raising some money and getting some money in the bank, and seeing how also the traction that we get on this NFT sale will say a lot about how what the future will look like. Also the amount of money. I think there's this ideal around bootstrapping yourself and not raising from VCs. But I mean, in many ways, there's this whole narrative around the fact that VCs are often a pain in the ass. Now, it's not always the case, and they're here for a reason. So yeah, I think there's no general rule here. It's more about the project you're trying to build. If you're having to develop a product and you have these very long cycles of you have to have devs on the payroll for 2 years before you release the first beta product, or you'll certainly have to go for VC money. In our case, is like we're pretty light. Our use case is pretty light in terms of work needed ahead of launch, so we could probably try and go and bootstrap. But I think it's a very, it's still a big question mark. But yeah, Romain.
No, because I find this model interesting of NFTs, because I'm sorry, Romain, I don't give you the mic, but. Like the thing that happened like with, for example, Moonbirds not so long ago is, I think it's interesting because before like you either raised with VCs, either like you were launching a token, but it meant that you need to give a bit of governance to the community somehow. So you kind of need to decentralize to raise some money with the community, but now you have kind of this like intermediary level with like NFTs, so you get money from the community, but you don't give like governance. In exchange, you give a utility like ascent of belonging, etc. But it's still like I feel it's like kind of an intermediary like fundraising model that enables community ownership, but still prevents like governance like issues that you could have if you just decentralize too early your governance.
Yeah, that's a great question. And also I think on the long run, like some of these NFTs might give a governance power. We were not committing on this, but that's still a possibility. But I think what's interesting is also, VCs are eliminating part of the risk they were taking just by, we're seeing some projects raising tons of money. So an example is Mad Realities recently. Their project working on some TV reality show based, leveraging NFTs for governance and involving people in decisions on the show. And they had a very successful crowdfund, and eventually they just raised like $6 million in a seed round from Paladin, which by many is considered to be like the top fund in crypto. And so I feel there's this like interesting pattern that's being established. now, like, I think, yeah, it's not entirely sure where this will go. And of course, like for VCs, like having very successful crowdfund, seeing and tons of enthusiasm around the project is eliminating so much risk. So I expect they're just like looking at all the crowdfunds and checking what project's the most sexy and just trying to ape in. Yeah.
Yeah, fundraising is an interesting concept. It's very, I would say, there's a lot of fights on Twitter, especially on crypto Twitter, when you hear people talking about fundraising. It's impossible to do any R&D or actually do a fully developed protocol or any dApp without funds. So either you already had funds or you're fundraising from someone, but you won't just build something cool from nothing. It's impossible. You have to pay rent, right? I think there's a lot of things that aren't spoken, mainly that actually fundraising from a lot of people on the internet is actually illegal. I'm sorry, I used to be a banking lawyer. But you're supposed to do a prospectus, you're supposed to do KYC on all of your investor, and you're going to have a tough time actually scaling your project on a real long-term vision if you don't actually try to do the things by the books, because people are going to try to catch you back. So that's the big problem. We didn't actually raise a token to fundraise. We did a private round beforehand. They kind of say money corrupts people. I think that's true. We're very fortunate. We raised roughly $2.5 million. And it's actually really cool because we worked for 8 months without paying ourselves. At least I was paying the devs a bit, but I wasn't getting paid. And suddenly I get to pay rent and I can even pay myself to go on holidays. I don't have the time, but suddenly I can do that. And it's interesting because you're like, wow, I want to keep having that level. Maybe I should raise again. Maybe I should add fees on my protocol and it's directly going to go to my company. So the more money and the more power your company is going to have, even though their main mission is building a decentralized protocol, the more you'll be incentivized to keep on giving power and money to that company. So having a powerful company is actually, on the long term, a paradox because it's going to prevent you from building the right decentralized systems. So the way we've been trying to circumvent this at Paladin is that we actually have very little tokens compared to a lot of projects. So we can't really raise because everything is in the DAO chest, so it would be the DAO that would be raising. That's the first thing. And the second thing is that all my team is around the world. We're like 3 in France, 3 in the US, 2 in Canada. I think there's 1 in Lithuania, 1 in Japan. So we're already kind of decentralized and asynchronous. And the idea is that we're slowly going to push everyone away from the company and towards the DAO. So to come back to the fundraising, because I'm sorry, I don't think fundraising it's bad. It's necessary. The problem is, what are you fundraising? How much time is it going to last? And how are you putting this in the spirit of decentralization? In the sense, how do you prevent this from actually becoming a centralized system? And I'll give you an example that's interesting. Aave, which is a really cool DeFi project, they centralized a lot of things around the team. And what's been interesting is that we've actually been seeing them decentralize quite a lot in the last few weeks. For example, the main dev team actually created their own company, which I think is called Board Ghost Developers, and they're actually getting a budget for the DAO to work for the DAO for 3 years. So part of the team is moving to the specific company with a specific expertise. Another part of the team, the other companies, is mainly in charge of institutionals and of marketing and business development. And slowly, they're pushing all of the responsibilities into different DAOs and companies. And I think that's how we get to some place that's really decentralized. It's not really about the money, it's about the plan.
Love it. All right, I think that we can now open up to questions from the crowd. I don't know who has the mic. And yeah, if you have any question, just raise your hand and we're here to answer.
Hi, I have a question for Louis. I've been following you a little bit on Twitter lately, and I was attracted to the fact that you are preoccupied with the mental health or health, general like well-being mentally of people that work in this type of environment, in DAOs, in like fully remote, all corners of the world, or stuff like that. I'm also preoccupied about this. I'm a process guy. My question would be, I'm curious to know if you can share with us what were the most frustrating or painful 2-3 examples of related to work in a DAO or process, or what did really hurt?
Yeah, thanks for the question. Thanks for following me on Twitter as well. Follow Albiverse on Twitter. So I think it really depends on your position in the ecosystem, and I feel like now that I'm working on Twoplus and trying to get the project off the ground, I have different problems than when I was working and contributing to multiple different DAOs at the same time. But I guess I think it's especially true in a. I mean, there are different levels to it. So there are all the challenges that come with working remote, but that goes way beyond Web3. I think we're all going through this with this thing, and with the challenges that we've seen, and so many projects are actually addressing that. There's so many great projects that are addressing remote work and at a very high level, and things like isolation or lack of motivation or whatever it is, lack of this kind of like human element is really, I mean, has been affecting me also, because working in crypto was pretty isolating. The fact that, I mean, my friends, I mean, I would explain crypto to people, and they would say, you seem really passionate about it, but like, looking at me like I was a bit of an alien for a long time, until recently when NFTs took off. So I mean, so this thing is definitely one thing I think that for now is still a thing. Working in DAOs especially, I think, and especially when you're doing community work, it's like everything's pulling you in tons of different directions. The work is endless. You get like quickly get like 100 requests or DMs a day. So basically, there's this huge struggle of going through your DMs and inbox that comes really, really early in your job. Like that's the struggle that most people, like managers and executives and CEOs, go through when they're working at their companies. But the thing is, like here, it might be, on Twitter and also on your Discord and the community asking your stuff, and also there's this other project you're involved with, so you have to kind of like keep track of this other project as well. And so basically, there's this like permanent context switching thing that can be really draining for your brain. I think there's neuroscience studies, showing how this can be really bad and can actually harm your mental capacities. And yeah, another thing that I want to point out is like the maturity. I mean, how the tools are designed today, using Discord, using Twitter, using all these different things, is like things that are going to rewire your brain in a way that wasn't intended to. So for example, just like using these tools intensively, like they were not thought for people just to use them 10 hours a day or 8 hours a day, or just work at a professional level with. And this is harmful as well. So there are so many different areas to explore, both on like how do you create connection with other people, how do you create better tools, how do you also yourself become better at managing yourself, prioritizing, which are things that usually you have to do. Most people do not do, because there's a manager, there's a CEO taking decisions. Also, like the work culture, the work day is set by these cultural norms that we have explored for, like we have set up through like for the past like 2 centuries. Now it's a new game, new environment. So you have to reinvent the wheel in many ways. And so that's kind of like what we aspire to do, is like shape this culture and put like this kind of like mental fitness, mental health element at the center.
Hi, thanks for the talk. I had a question maybe for Romain or for any of you guys about how when you design tokenomics for a DAO, you would keep bad actors out. What I call a bad actor is typically what Romain has mentioned for a DAO. I don't know the name of, where an actor came in and just took all the funds and got out. How do you maybe design something that keeps these kind of people out?
I think there's many ways, and if you look at each of us, we all have different ways of doing it. The first one is actually being careful about who you're distributing your tokens to, because when you're distributing governance, you're distributing decision-making power. To give you guys a bit more details, I was referring to an investment DAO that was called Congruent. Their main mission was to accumulate governance token and earn yield with these governance tokens for their holders, basically. So they were like some kind of decentralized hedge fund. And at some point, because the market is a bit complicated, someone came in and said, look, the market cap of the token is lower than their holdings. So I'm just going to buy a few tokens, like maybe 5% of their supply during a week. and then I'm going to put up a vote asking for them to liquidate their treasury, close down the project, and give him back all of the money that's in the treasury, because they're worth less than what they actually own. So that's something that people used to do in traditional finance, right? There's a very, very rich person in France called Vincent Bolloré who did all his business on that. And that's interesting. I mean, it's what we call sharks. That's okay, but we have to design knowing that people like this are doing so. So when you're putting something like a token out, you have to expect that there's going to be what we call antagonistic actors. So either you can have mechanisms like slashing, for example, in staking, that are going to punish them, or you're going to have to monitor the distribution. You're going to need the vetoes to actually put them out if they don't respect the goals that you're going to outline in some kind of constitution. Because if you look at any type of organization, be it a state, a company, or an association, they all have a document that's outlining the behavior that's expected. And if they don't respect it, you can just cut them out of the decision-making process. And that's some of the many reasons I'm just thinking of. Maybe you want to add something?
Yeah, I mean, with the DAO launching, which is kind of institutional liquid staking, there's 3 ways where you can look at governance, and who's holding the governance token, who's holding the multi-sig of the claim contract that's where you're going to stake, and who's going to run the validators, because DAOs are about managing communities. So liquid staking, it's managing the communities of stakers and managing the communities of validators that will, where you're going to stake your funds. So obviously, if you stake your tokens on Lido, for example, Lido launched with a multi-sig of like 4 or 5 companies that had billions of dollars in their smart contract, and now they are decentralizing a little bit more through the DAO. But again, like, you need to choose right the 4 or 5 or 6 or 7 or 10 companies that you're going to give the multi-sig to in the beginning before decentralizing a little bit more, because that's billions of money from users that are old in the power of a multi-sig. Same for governance. We like in our governance we use only companies in the industry and not VCs. Because we don't think we need the Paradigm or S16D of this world to explain us what is liquid staking or what is staking. We think we know it a little bit more than them. And maybe last but not least, the validators, in our standpoint, is that you stake, you're going to put your funds like in a contract, for example, Lido, and then is going to go to validators. And there's this risk of slashing. So you want to make sure, even if you want to have many validators, and in the future, maybe in 2, 3, 10 years, you could run a validator and plug to Lido. So a part of your own funds that you will be staking will go through your own validators that you're going to be running as well. That's for now. That's it's a phantasm. Whereas you have to choose the right validators in the beginning, because there's a risk of slashing, and if you choose the wrong person, might burn a lot of tokens from the DAO users, and obviously nobody's going to be happy, and even if it's a decentralized project, it will end very badly. So I guess launching a DAO, there's paths to decentralization, and there's many ways to give power to the different community that you roll through DAO. Do you want to say anything, Louis, about that?
Don't be bad.
Any other questions?
Hi guys, thank you for your presentation. So for a few, what is your favorite DAO? What is the best implementation that you can refer, like an example, to what is aimed when you launch a DAO?
Sorry, can you just repeat the end of the question? I'm not sure I got it.
What is the best implementation of a DAO? What is, I don't know, is it Maker or just a quick question? You don't have to explain that.
Yeah, I think one thing that I, just setting a bit of context before answering this, because I think that's why this DAO term is really tricky, because it covers such a broad, and even here, like, there are like very, very different examples of DAOs, like basically just like operating according to different principles, and so basically there'll be like there's been attempts to categorize the different types of DAOs today in the ecosystem, and there has been names given to these different categories. So some are like protocol DAOs. There's more like DeFi projects. Some will be like social DAOs or collector DAOs, or basically they're like it's just appending the word DAO to anything that you do as a group on the internet. And there's ways just to coin that, the question is pretty broad. So maybe there's a DAO that or like a type of DAO that interests you most, and then we'll probably be able to provide a better answer at like especially if that's you mentioned Maker and all this stuff. I think that's more of their area. Like, what are the best types of implementation of DAOs in that area? Maybe we can give an answer here.
Yeah, so I'm going to preach my choir, as Louis said, because I do not know DAOs outside of DeFi, or at least very few of them, simply because, well, I don't have the time to look at anything else. I can think of 3 DAOs that are particularly impressive. The first one is Maker, because of the testament of time they've done. They've really decentralized in the sense that they don't even have a company anymore, and they just have pods that are around basically all of the company. I think they call these core units. So each one of them is specialized, and they onboard them and offboard them during necessities. You have another one that's very impressive in terms of organization and structure, which is Index Coop. They're basically building a DeFi ETF.
Yeah.
And a third one that might be probably more controversial is Olympus Dao. They were like the darling of 2021. What people don't know is that there's hundreds of contributors who actually stayed and who still are building that project and who are doing weekly sync. And it's impressive how people got around and just started building things around it, around the core idea. So I think it depends on what you're looking for. Is it structure? Is it processes? Is it experience? Or is it just the sheer nature, like I would say the energy of decentralization? And depending on these, like you can choose any of 3 or other DAOs. It depends what you're looking for in a DAO.
Which one was the first one you mentioned?
Maker?
Maker? Okay. Yeah, I'd like to add Yearn, which I think is an interesting in between like something like Index and something like Maker, because it's like a DeFi project, but also who has like this very deep culture on how, and very opinionated on how you should operate as a DAO at the human level. So I think it's a great project to look at. Yearn Finance.
Do you want to answer, Laszlo?
Come on, the only DAO I look at is Lido. Come on. I mean, I've just seen like their, I could see that this pass in that Lido. It's a complicated DAO because now they have there's so much power in Lido and so much money that it's kind of the interest of Lido. It's to keep Ethereum decentralized. So Lido, it's a kind of DAO. It's liquid staking is the first DeFi kind of like product, and it's at the protocol level, so it matches kind of the interest of the protocol, which is to stay decentralized. So I think they took like such a hard time recently not to be decentralized enough, to be too much VC backed, and to have the 16Z paradigm of this world, and to have like 2 less validators, whereas Ethereum wants to have 300,000 or 1 million validators, and in Lido there's only 30, which we're part of. So no, I can understand that's hard, and they are trying to decentralize the governance, decentralize the way that you choose validators, granting you and you and me like to run validators on your own machine. So I know it's hard. I've talked to the Maker guys, and they have decentralized the process so much. So they once you decide on basically a decision or an important strategy point in the company, you will pass through months of processes, right? And it might repass backward. I mean, come on, DAO is Maker. You have to be PhD to understand the organization of Maker. It's crazy. All I can say.
Yeah, and on my side, like I just like to highlight Bankless DAO. I think that in terms of how they provide context, how they onboard people on the Discord, how they also structure the sub DAOs that can then actually like actually provide services to other sub-DAOs in exchange of money. So they're kind of creating a microeconomy inside the DAO itself. I think it's a quite interesting example to look to, like in terms of really like in terms of processes and how it's structured and how it's like kind of efficient, even though like it's been, I don't know, it's not a DAO that's been here for years. Like they're quite new.
If I can, maybe one comment. I think you said it. You said like DAOs are either two options: either the centralized company that becomes decentralized, or either like a corporation of different companies that creates a protocol to bound together and create value together. I think at some point when the DAOs mature, it's always the second option. It's always like different companies that operate together through protocol and had values in a different way. So, for example, in Lido, or even the DAO that we're launching, you will have many companies for a specific liquid staking product on the protocol. On Ethereum, Solana, Marinade might do the Solana bit, or Stater might do the Cosmos one. We will do the Ethereum, and it's going to be different teams, different companies that brings value to the same protocol. I think at the end, and when DAOs mature, that's a bit what a DAO is.
Other questions?
Beers?
Yeah, I think we can wrap up. All right, thank you guys. Thank you everybody for coming.
Thanks,
for asking
Vlad.
questions.
Thanks for organizing.
Pleasure.